Hey everyone, welcome to the E2 Effective Elders podcast. Visit us at e2elders.org and please share this good word with others.
Hey everybody, Merry Christmas. Before we go any further, Merry Christmas.
Ho, ho, ho. Ho, ho, ho.
And Dr. Billy, alias Santa Claus there on the
you.
screen. Look at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're very grateful that we can be together for this last podcast of 2023. And Billy and I, we want to say thank you to partners like that of CDF Capital, who makes possible conversations like this. And thank you to the hundreds of people who are either listening to or watching the podcast, and not only here in the United States, but many of you are outside of the United States, and we're grateful. So keep sharing the link to these podcasts with people that you know might be encouraged by them. So, hey, Dr. Billy.
Yes.
We're going to talk about money today.
Oh, I have to go now. I have to go.
Well, last month, Jim Obold was so helpful to us in talking about structuring salary packages of those who are on a church staff. Well, what we want to do is this month have a conversation about how do we create a culture of generosity. It's Christmas. You already have Miss Carol's present purchased?
Yeah, I'm going to wrap myself in paper and put a bow on my head and sit under the Christmas tree and give myself to her. I told a fellow professor that I was going to do that. That's what I was giving Carol for Christmas, and he said, well, I wasn't giving my wife much either.
There you go. Well, Leah and I, we just got back from a much-needed vacation, and so that was our Christmas present to each other. And we got to get out there and get the gifts for the grandkids. But December is a gift-giving time of year, and what if we could experience generosity 365 days throughout the year? That's what we're talking about in this podcast. A lot of churches right now are experiencing a decline in giving, and they have been, not just over recent months, but actually extended over the last few years. Giving it's really hard. Giving is on the decline. So what Billy and I would like to do is talk about building a culture of generosity where people are giving 365 days throughout the year. Billy, you want to talk about that word generosity a little bit, please?
Yeah, generosity simply means that you're giving to others beyond what's expected. I mean, there are expectations that you should give at Christmas time, be more charitable, and really December is the big month for charitable giving, and being kind to other people at Thanksgiving, helping the homeless and serve meals. This is a time of year where there's so much generosity, but then we stop, and then January comes. But what the challenge is to be generous 365, Christmas 365. How do we take how we really are bent towards generosity in December and then make it a lifestyle every day of the year, and that means that we give beyond what's expected.
Yeah, and that might require a shift in our thinking. Don't Paul in Romans 12 verses 1 and 2, don't be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be changed, transformed by the renewing of your mind. So maybe we need to change the way we think about giving. It sounds like then if we go from December into January, February, March, that generosity flows. There's a culture of generosity flowing through the church and through individuals. So talk about that word flow a little bit, please.
In sports now, they talk about an athlete being in the flow and having flow. Flow is talked about in the arts and music and entertainment and writing, that it's a person who is marrying up the skills, their skilled attributes with their ability but with their attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And then come to that moment, we used to call it being in the zone.
Yes, being in the zone. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so you're not working at it. I mean, you've practiced, you've got muscle memory, but it just becomes a part of your flow, who you are, so that generosity we've received becomes a lifestyle for us. So it flows. A true generosity, giving beyond what's expected as a lifestyle, is about flow, flow.
Well, let's do this. In the time that we have today, let's come up with 5 suggestions, 5 challenges for elders and or staff to create a culture of generosity flowing in the church. So what I'll do, let me share what that suggestion is, that challenge, and then why don't you unpack it a little bit from scripture, maybe some of the language insights. So number 1, if we're going to create a culture of generosity, number 1, generosity flows from thoughtful thanksgiving or thankfulness. Thoughtful thankfulness.
We find Jesus praying multiple times in the New Testament. And in Matthew 14:19, it simply says that it's the feeding of the 5,000. It got down there at the end and all the skepticism. Jesus told everybody sit down on the grass in rows and organized them. Then it said he took 5 loaves, little pita breads really, and 2 small smoked fish. And he looked up towards heaven and he blessed them. Means he said good words. The word for bless there is eulogy. It's what we do at funerals. We speak good words about people who weren't good people sometimes. But Jesus speaks good words of praise to God, and then he gave it to the disciples who distributed it. So Jesus gives thanks. We find Jesus so thankful in his relationship to the Father, and that generosity flows out of him. And if we are truly thoughtfully thankful, not oh by the way thankful, but thoughtfully, truly filled with thanksgiving for the blessings and all that God does for us, well, then generosity can flow. But if we're not thankful, then all we are, when it comes time to give of ourselves, our time, talent, or treasure, then we're begrudging of it. We're begrudging of it.
You know, again, that it has to do with how we think. So if I think God is holding out on me, if I think I am living a life that has not been provided for amply by God, if I think that I'm living in want, then I'm not going to be generous. You know, Paul in Philippians, one of the prison letters, he says in chapter 4, he says in verse 8, finally, brothers, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on such things. And that word think, if you'll remember, is logizomai. And we get logarithm from it. I stopped math class. I barely made it through geometry. I can spell the word logarithm. I cannot do a logarithm. But here's this word that means think deeply, profoundly, for a long period of time. Concentrate on everything that's good in life. And if I'm thinking about everything that's good in life, and see God's goodness in my life. Psalm 27, verse 13, I'm still confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living.
Do you remember that old hymn? Count your blessings. Name them one by one. And a person who counts their blessings rather than their problems, generosity is just going to flow in all of its forms.
Absolutely. Number 2, here's a second challenge to create a culture of generosity. Generosity flows from unreasonable hope. Unreasonable hope. Expand on that, please.
Jesus this story just kills me every time I read it. I can't hardly preach on it without tears, and I'm not a demonstrative a crier from the pulpit. But that little widow woman who was at the temple, Jesus was sitting outside the temple in Mark chapter 12. And Jesus is sitting outside the temple with the apostles, and there's a collection box right there on the outside on the entryway. They're like trumpet-like instruments. You remember the time when we had in grocery stores, they'd have this place where you could toss your pennies and it looked like a trumpet, then it'd spin around and around. Well, you can imagine something like that for the offering boxes at the temple. So it said that Jesus and the apostles were watching, just sitting there watching, and they were watching people put in large amounts, and they had coins, not paper. But then this little widow woman comes up.
Wait, stop right there. Hold that thought.
Yeah.
They didn't have paper, so their coins are gold, silver, copper. They're throwing in large amounts, so they would go clang, clang, clang on those trumpet-like bells. And so Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, so when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do. So when they were throwing in all that money, they were announcing that, clanging with that sound. Look at how much money I'm giving. So, all right, now with that being said, here comes this widow, and she puts in the 2 little copper coins. So talk about that, please.
The smallest denomination of coins. And so Jesus is watching her while the apostles have mostly focused on the people who would take a dollar bill and turn it into 100 pennies so that they get all this resounding clanging and all the attention. And this little widow woman, and a widow woman in first century Judaism, you can't get any lower than that,
right?
Because you couldn't own property as a woman, you couldn't inherit as a widow. You're going to be at the mercies of your nearest male relative, or hopefully be in the temple. So she puts these 2 little tiny coins in, and she's hoping. She's hoping, because what they notice is Jesus says she put in all she had. He didn't put in some, he put in all. Barely enough to buy a half a loaf of bread, but she is hoping that to get God's attention on her plight, and that there's something beyond the bread of the moment, that there's something for eternity. Talk about faith, man. How if you were homeless, destitute, no income, and you had just a few coins for a little bit of bread, how inclined would you be to throw it all in, to give it to God? So it's all about her hope, not her situation, but her hope.
You know, that text that you bring up, when she puts in those 2 copper coins, the Greek, I think it means thin ones, T-H-I-N, thin ones. And we get our English word leaf from that Greek word. So these coins of hers are thin as a leaf. They're not going to make any sound at all.
No.
And it caught nobody's attention, but it certainly caught the attention of Jesus, because she put in all that she had on which to live.
And since she gave it all, I say, if she gave it all, we can give something, you know?
Well, you're right. When you bring that word hope in, some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. So, all right. So hope, our hope is in the Lord. Number 3, here's a challenge: to create a culture of generosity. Number 3, generosity flows from purposeful imitation. And imitation, what do you mean by that?
Well, Genesis 1, we're made in the imago Dei, the imitation of God. And you just can't get more generous than the Lord. You can't outgive him. And his nature is generosity. So built in with us is generosity. It's already in there. We just have to let it out. It's our greed, our fear, our selfishness, You know, our desire, I mean, our generation, our parents came out of World War II, so they taught us, you know, collect all you can, keep it all. When you die, you have a big pile and you win. And it winds up going to kids that don't even like you sometimes. but well, generosity flows from purposeful imitation of God and of Jesus.
Yeah, when you mention Imago Dei, that we've been made in his image, you make me remember John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave. God is outrageously generous. And having been made in his image, we have the capacity, the capability of being generous as well.
And I mean, God isn't just generous at Christmas time when we, you know, look at the plastic Jesus and nativity scenes and remember, I mean, God is generous 24/7, 365. And this is going to be leap year, so it's going to be 366 days next year. I mean, it's his nature. Well, he built us that way. We just got to get us out of the way. And it won't make any difference whether it's Christmas or May 3rd. We're going to be generous. It flows.
Jesus said, no greater love has anyone than he lay down his life for his
friends.
So that's generosity beyond our comprehension. So if you and I claim to be Christians, 1 John 2:6, we must live as Jesus lived. He was outrageously generous. So we create a culture through purposeful imitation. Number 4, if we're going to create a culture of generosity that flows, number 4, generosity flows from focused trust.
Focused trust. Yeah, focused trust is not real complicated. It is, you can't trust if you know the future for sure. But trust is where you're saying, I trust God. I trust God with my family, my finances, my future, with eternity. He is faithful. I don't have to watch my back. And even Jesus said, you know, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. So generosity can't flow if you don't trust that God's going to take care of you in the future, no matter how small your pile might be, like that little widow woman, or how big it is. You know, when's enough where you're just going to trust him with generosity?
Yeah, if we're trusting God to make sure that our grave is empty, if we're trusting God that our last breath here becomes our first breath there in his presence, absent from the body is to be home with the Lord, well, we should be able to trust him with tithes and offerings.
Absolutely.
We should be able to do that. That God's going to come through with his promise. He's going to give to us more than sufficient.
And the promise is in Matthew 6. Seek first what?
His kingdom.
And then what? What happens?
And all these things will be given to you as well. And that's that section from the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, don't worry about your body, what you're going to wear. Don't worry about your life, what you're going to eat or drink.
I mean, generosity is going to flow out of trust. And the more you trust God, that he'll take care of you. He's got your daily bread. You know, he's got what you need for not just the next week, but for all eternity. Then you can let go of stuff and you can be outrageously generous. It'll flow.
Yeah, this is easy for me to remember. But in 1956, the year that I was born, our Congress formally adopted our nation's motto, which is what?
In God we trust.
In God we trust. And I did a little bit of research about that. One of the reasons why our nation was compelled to adopt that in 1956 was because the Soviet Union then was declaring there is no God. Well, our volley back to them during the Cold War, not with a missile, no, we're going to volley with a worldview. And our world review is, oh yeah, there's a God. And guess what? It's in God that we trust. It's printed on every piece of currency. It is minted on every piece of coinage. The question is, do I?
Yeah. Especially with the paper and the coins, the phrase is written on. Yeah. As I look at it, am I just going to keep it all for me? Or am I going to let generosity flow and say, it's written right on here, I do trust in God, so I'm going to give it. I'm going to give generously.
And then number 5, last challenge. If we're going to somehow, some way build and grow a culture of generosity, number 5, generosity flows from unreasonable compassion. Unreasonable compassion.
Unreasonable compassion. There's compassion in the form of sympathy, but unreasonable compassion moves you beyond your emotions, moves you to action. It's like the story of the Good Samaritan. The Levite, the rabbis, they just walked by, priest and Levite. Poor Jewish guy was about dead in the ditch, and it was the Samaritan, who was supposed to hate the guy in the ditch, who parked his brain in neutral, didn't ask how he got in the ditch, but he just jumped in. It's not very reasonable. It's not reasonable for Jesus to go to the cross. I mean, be thankful that I'm not the Son of God, because I'd have let everybody go to hell. It's what we deserve. We had a saying in seminary when we got tough: anything above hell is a privilege. As well. But I mean, that's what we do. That's what we deserve. But unreasonable compassion of God, unreasonably compassion to us, motivated him to give himself, all of it, on the cross.
I remember when you were my prof in seminary, it goes back a few years, but you explained that word compassion in Greek.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that, please.
The Greek word splachna. Now say it with me. Splachna.
Splachna. That's right. Spit all over my screen.
The view of the human being back then was in 3 parts. There was the nous, which was the mind. It was the cardia, which is the heart. And then there's the what in Philemon is translated into King James as bowels, intestines. That was considered the seat of raw emotion. We even have a saying, I feel it in my gut. That's where you park your brain in neutral and you don't use it, and you just, on raw emotion, you jump in. Splachna is compassion with legs on it, where we have to get in. We don't stand back and say, he made his own bed, let him lie in it. Stupid is stupid. No judgment. And other people will look back and say, that's unreasonable to help somebody like that, or you gave too much. I remember I was first year of ministry. We had a couple of missionaries in, CY and Pat Kim, and they needed a special offering. This is 35 years ago. They needed a special offering, so we took after the service. We got to get the church money first. A second offering, the love offering, and I'll never forget it. I'd never done a love offering before, so I said, "You're going to take this up. I'm going to pray." So I said, "Let's bow our heads." And then this 2 little old ladies whose hearing aids weren't working started talking to each other before I could say anything. And one of them says, "You got to get a missionary." And this woman said, $10. And I mean, you could hear them through the whole church because nobody was saying anything. The other one said, $10? That's too much. She said, just take a dollar bill and fold it up with the one showing. They'll think you're giving $10. And the other one said, okay. And all I did was say amen. And then the offering plates went around, and they got the biggest offering in the history of love offerings in that church, because those old ladies were sitting there being deceitful. You're giving too much. Well, unreasonable
compassion.
Compassion.
That word compassion
helps flow.
Yeah, when you talk about from the gut,
Yeah.
Matthew chapter 9, verse 36, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them. They were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd.
Yeah.
You know, when we move beyond sympathy, to where we enter into the world of empathy, and we try to enter the suffering of others, the need of others, then we're going to more than likely create a culture of generosity, because we're trying to feel the suffering, the need of others. Yeah.
But we enter
right.
into their experience.
So we have these 5 things: being thankful, being hopeful. Doesn't matter what happens in this world, our hope is anchored in the Lord Jesus Christ. We've been made in his image. We have the spiritual DNA within us to be outrageously generous. We are putting our trust in the Lord. He's going to come through. He's going to put food on the table. He's going to keep the roof over the head. He's going to keep the clothes on the
promises. Back. Yeah.
He keeps his promises. That Philippians chapter 4, verse 19, and my God will meet all your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4:19. So trust, and then finally compassion. Yeah. Will we be men and women to enter into the suffering of others with the compassion of Jesus Christ? So if we can remember those challenges, we can day by day throughout 2024, one day at a time, have Christmas 365, a culture of generosity. Yeah. In an era now when people are finding it difficult to give.
Or so fearful of future, they want to hoard. Rather than put into kingdom service. Jesus said, lay not up your treasure where? On earth. He said, on earth, but give, be generous, and lay it up in heaven. Jesus said these words in Acts chapter 20, verse 35. Now, it's interesting. The words are in red, which means Jesus said them. Paul is the one that gave it to us. And they don't appear anywhere in the Gospels or anywhere else. Jesus says it's more blessed to give than it is to receive.
Incredible. Well, you know what? We're going to pick up next month, January of 2024, with a whole new focus. And so folks, be sure to tune in again, save this setting, put it into Spotify, into your YouTube, save the link to this podcast. It's always posted as well in our social media on Facebook, but share it, please. If something is said that you know could be of great encouragement to a friend, a fellow elder, a minister serving elsewhere, share the link with them so that it can be indeed something to strengthen and build them up. Well, Dr. Billy, I hope that you and Miss Carol have a great Christmas.
Looking forward. We get to spend it with the grandkids for 4 days, so we're excited. We're excited.
Yeah, absolutely. That means you're coming to Indianapolis, yes?
Indianapolis. That's it. That's it. That's right. It's kind of scary, leaving our community, which we live 6 miles outside of a town of 100 people. And our kids, our daughter-in-law and son and 3 grandkids live in downtown Indy. So I'm scared. I'm scared of traffic.
It's all good. All right, buddy. Well, blessings.
All right, love you.
Love you all. Talk to you later.
Thank you all for being generous to E2.
Yes, indeed. We are so grateful for your prayers and for your provision. Yes. You are enabling us to impact the lives of churches, not only here in the United States, but literally now around the world. 27 countries are now using our material, and our material is in 6 foreign languages. We're so grateful. So, folks, thank you for your generous gifts. We are so mindful of that. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Bless you.
All right. Bye-bye.